When did you first try acting, just even, at a fun or local level? Forget about, because I know obviously you started professionally young too, but just what was the first bite of the apple?
I think the first bite of the apple actually came from an interest in singing. My mom took me to her singing lesson that she was doing. We were living in Connecticut at the time.
Where in Connecticut? I'm from Connecticut.
Danbury.
Yeah.
We lived in Danbury and Simsbury first,
Yep.
and then Danbury. I feel like the story is she didn't have a babysitter, therefore I came along to the voice lesson, and she was doing it for fun. I said, I want to do that. And then she gave me the voice lessons instead of keeping it for herself, which is, I think back to it now that I'm a mom, and I'm like, oh my God, what moms do for their kids.
Right.
We give up all the things we love.
Right.
We give them our cool things. And we don't even think twice. You just do it. You sacrifice because you want them.
Right.
You want everything for them.
Was there also something about Annie on Broadway? This came up in the last time we spoke in 2012, so I wanted to follow up on that.
Yes. So the singing lesson started then, and I think I was around 6 or 7, because we moved from Connecticut when I was about 8. So what happened was I was doing these singing lessons, and then there was a sort of a casting call that we maybe read in the paper or something about Annie on Broadway, and that they were seeing young kids. So we went to New York, and I did the audition, and I got called back and managed to get down to the last 30 girls.
Wow.
And then got cut.
And that was at a time when you'd never, how much acting could you have done before that? But you had not done even like in school stuff probably before that.
Honestly, I don't think so. Maybe little schooly things, but so insignificant that it wasn't, I really don't have a recollection of anything before that, truly. So when that happened, I think that was the bug, because I remember sitting on my staircase at our house in Danbury and just literally crying my eyes out for hours and hours that my life is over.
Because
I did not get Annie. I will not be on Broadway. I didn't even know what that meant, and the kind of commitment that would have been.
Would have been rough.
It would have been horrible probably. I probably would have not made it. Been, I don't want to do this anymore. Of course, who knows what it would have been like. I think that was the bug.
Yeah. So you mentioned that you guys moved again after that, and that was to Boulder, Colorado. Mm-hmm. So how in Boulder, Colorado, do you learn about the International Modeling and Talent Association, which I don't believe is based in Boulder, Colorado, or anywhere near Boulder, Colorado?
Right, it's not. So we learn about that because we got involved with a talent agency in Denver. Mm-hmm. I was doing commercial acting classes in the summer for fun. Mm-hmm. How to I love Diet Snapple. It's delicious, literally that simple.
Right.
And it was fun. And my mom would drive me to Denver, and I would do my class. And my brother would hang around with her, and then we'd go home. Mm-hmm. And the owner of that agency, I think her name is Diane McFarland. And she said to my mom, something like, maybe your kid has a good look, and she's got something.
Right.
Do you want to be a part of this IMTA, which basically we bring kids from out of town, and we will train you, and we will help you prepare your monologues, your songs, modeling walks, dancing, all of it. And then we'll take you to Los Angeles, and you will compete for a week. And I don't remember how, I don't know if I just said yes and my parents were like, okay. They probably were just, I was enjoying myself.
Right.
So they're like, why not?
Right.
I don't know if we'll get anywhere from this. And that's how we got introduced to the IMTA.
And so you go out to LA for that week. You're 11. Again, as you mentioned, part of the appeal is that you are being seen by people in the industry for the first time. And how did that come out?
So it was great, actually. It was a really fun experience. I remember enjoying myself. It was, what I loved doing. And by the end of the week, what happened is they would basically give you callbacks, kind of. Yeah. And they would give you all these names of different casting agents or managers or agents that were interested in meeting with you in person. Mm-hmm. So I got a big list of all these people that wanted to see me in person, and, kind of go around the big ballroom, sitting at different people's tables and talking with them and introducing yourself and whatever. And at the end of the whole week, I ended up winning a scholarship to the Diane Hill Hardin's acting school for kids
in
Los Angeles.
Okay.
And that was a huge thing. I didn't know her. I didn't know anything. We didn't know anything, but she said, come out. I would love to manage you. I would love for you to come to my school and come for pilot season.
Did you guys even really understand what that meant at that point?
No, definitely not.
For somebody who's listening and has no idea, what would that mean for not only a kid, but for anybody to come out for pilot season?
Right.
What does that entail?
So pilot season is a certain amount of time, a few months of the year where it doesn't really happen as consistently now as it used to, right? Because the content providers are so unusual.
Right.
So it's a little different now, but back in those days, there was a few months, like in the spring, I think, and it's when all the pilots would be casting. Hence the term pilot season, and you just go out and you would, audition hopefully for everything, anything and everything under the sun. And that was sort of the big moment to get a show, get on TV, and at least, or get a pilot and in hopes that it would get picked up.
And so this lady who you've now got the scholarship with is saying, stay or come back in, the next year? Or when were you going to now have your first taste of pilot season?
So I don't remember when IMTA was. When was the big earthquake? Because we were in LA, in that hotel, for that massive 8-point-something earthquake.
Wow, 92?
94, maybe? 94,
yeah.
94.
Yeah.
Whatever month that was, that's when the IMTA was. And then, so that way I could then go back and figure out when the next pilot season. I don't remember, though.
So you came back a year later or whatever.
We came back however many months later. And we stayed at the Oakwood Apartments.
Yes,
for 3
you can't imagine how many times that's come up on this podcast.
I mean, everybody stayed there because that's where you stayed.
Right.
And by the way, it was so much fun.
Because there's a lot of other kids in the same boat,
kids,
right?
A bunch of kids from out of town. Everyone is like doing the same thing and cool and excited to be there.
Month-to-month furnished rentals,
Month-to-month furnished rentals with a couple of pools and a volleyball court. It was... As an 11-year-old, it was heaven.
Yeah, it's like camp.
It's camp.
Yeah.
It was so much fun.
So the first pilot season that you were out here, maybe I've got this wrong, but is that the one where Pringles comes along? Like you started getting commercials and stuff, not necessarily real roles, but commercials?
I think maybe. Honestly, I don't remember if it was the first one or the second one. Okay. But Pringles was either first or second. And the Limited 2, I was modeling for kids, the kids version of the Limited. Yeah. Funny enough, with Jessica Alba.
Really?
We were modeling together. And there's old photos of us like so little with, funky teeth and bushy eyebrows. Right. It's actually really sweet. We were doing that, and that was kind of it. It wasn't very much. I didn't really strike anything at that point.
And logistically, how would this work? So would both your parents be out here for 3 months with you, or would it be a rotation, or how would you make it work?
Mainly it was my mom. My mom and my brother would come sometimes. I believe he would come for a while, but my dad was always at home with my brother. And then maybe they swapped on and off. I was never without guardians ever. So
when you were 14, maybe even 13, how did a pilot called Seventh Heaven first cross the radar? And when it did, was it just another in these probably long line of pilots that you were made aware of, but or did you look at this and say, I'm particularly excited about this? I would assume it was probably one of those ones that we were all really coveting, because of where it was going to be living and who was behind it and how many kids they were hoping to cast in this big family and thinking like, whoa, maybe I would actually have an opportunity for this thing, perfect age. But then again, if everyone was going to be super blonde or redheaded or, tan and dark hair, I may not fit. So it was a little bit of a shot in the dark, but I know we were excited about this one because this was a real series regular. And you mentioned who's behind it. I mean, this is Aaron Spelling, right? This is about as big as it could have gotten at that point. Definitely. And it was always, from the minute you first heard about it, it was going to be the WB, right? That was. Yes, I think so. Yes. So do you remember what the process was? Were there a bunch of auditions or chemistry things, or how did it all go down? There were definitely a bunch of auditions.
I just remember a lot of people behind a big table and coming back in multiple times, and then sitting out in a waiting room with all different types of kids, girls who were for my part,
right.
also younger girls and little girls, and then older guys, because they were sort of doing this, like, not necessarily chemistry, but like a matching kind of. We'd come back into the room with a group with, someone who could play Simon and who could play Ruthie, and then Lucy, and then me,
right.
and we'd all kind of stand there, and they would ask us questions, and we would be cute, and we would talk and try to do what we thought they wanted us to do, send us back out, and we wait again in the waiting room, and then they'd kind of reconfigure the group, and we'd go back in. I'd go back in with a new set of people, or a new group would go in. So there was all this kind of aesthetic family matching going on. And the one thing I remember about my audition, I'm really not sure why I chose to do this, but I do remember in the scene, Mary Camden is, a basketball player and an athlete. And so that was the part that I thought, well, I'm good for this because I am an athlete and I could do this really well. But she's spinning a basketball on her finger in the scene. So I did it in my audition without a basketball. Just fake.
You're a good mom.
So I'm sitting there going like this, like tapping the imaginary basketball.
Right.
And I think back to that now going, these people either loved it or they were like, oh, dear God.
We're going to have to put her in for some extra schooling. So how did you find out you got it? And was that just like the biggest thing that had ever happened?
Yes, that was the biggest thing that had ever happened to me in my young life. My mom and I were driving in our silver Subaru, which I subsequently, years later, completely totaled on the set of Seventh Heaven, actually.
How did you do that?
I was learning to drive. I was 15, and I, had my permit, and my mom said I could back the car up and turn it around out of the parking space to be prepared to leave.
Right.
I wasn't allowed to drive out of the parking lot. I popped the clutch, shot myself backwards, hit the school trailer, hit Mackenzie's school trailer, knocked it off its hinges, and literally almost killed my brother, who was standing like next to the car.
Oh my God. Well, Subaru saw a lot of things.
Oh my God. It was very scary. So years before, we're in the car, we're on Sunset Boulevard, which I felt was a little bit kind of perfect.
Yeah.
Like, right, iconic that you're on Sunset Boulevard. And Diane, my manager, called us, and my mom had it on speaker, and she said, you got the part. And my mom pulled the car over, and we just screamed and beat the steering wheel and jumped around, in our seats, and just screamed our heads off from,
awesome.
Forever.
Now, we should note that this was for a pilot. Like, all that you really knew at that point was that it was proceeding, but that this could still never see the light of day, right?
Yeah, exactly.
But it was still obviously a huge deal. I guess, from my understanding, it was after the pilot was shot, but before it was picked up, that you then go and do this movie, Ulee's Gold, with Peter Fonda, which he gets nominated for an Oscar for. Means a lot of people are now going to watch it and also see you. How important was that?
So that happened literally right after I get Seventh Heaven. Then I get this other thing, which was the second greatest thing that ever happened to me in my life. And that was a cool audition, I remember, because I had gone in all dark makeup and short skirt and like kind of rough looking and really tried to create the part.
Right.
So that was fun. I enjoyed that. It was just so exciting. I didn't really at the time understand who Peter Fonda was.
Right.
And
you weren't watching Easy Rider?
I wasn't watching Easy Rider, which was probably a good thing. I don't know.
Right.
But yeah, so we shoot the pilot, and then I go and I shoot this film in Florida, in this really small, kind of beachy, tiny town in Florida. Had the greatest time. Had so much fun, and didn't have any really understanding of, anything in terms of him being nominated and people.
Because this was your first movie,
This was my first film ever, and it was extra cool because we got to go to the Sundance Film Festival with it. The first time I've ever done that.
Right.
We did that a while after the film was released, or maybe right before its actual release. I don't even think I remembered, none of that made any sense to me, nor did I care. It was just I was excited to be there.
Right.
Put it that way.
Well, so whether that picture was meant to show it or not, you were now getting older and growing up beyond being able to be just a little girl anymore. And now, so what was the thought process that goes into leaving the show after the 6th season to go to college? Or was it just, I'm leaving, and then college was the thing to do after you're leaving? Or just how did you end up at Tufts?
I had just gotten to a point mentally and creatively that I just wasn't feeling very challenged anymore. And I needed something different. I wanted to do what my peers were doing, and that was go to college. And that was something that was important to my family, and being educated is something that, my dad felt strongly about, my mom felt strongly about, and I wasn't going to be forced. I mean, they weren't going to force me to do anything, but I just really was craving a more normalized experience. And I think I felt like I needed to take a break and not be a professionally working person for a while. So I was interested in going to the East Coast, and I, picked up my Fisk's Guide to 2000 and started reading up on schools. And of course, there were the regular ones that I was, when I say regular, I mean just the ones that I knew about.
Right.
NYU, SC in California, of course, the dreams of Berkeley.
Right.
And
the one that I wish I went to was Pepperdine. You're in Malibu, right?
Right. Pepperdine. Right. That's another one. And then I just happened to see Tufts in the book. It sounded cool. Sounded interesting. I was interested in Massachusetts. I was interested in BC. So that was kind of that area. And then I just went to go see a couple of these places one summery day with my mom. So I happened to see Tufts on a day when it was beautiful and people were throwing frisbees and hacky sacking on the quad, and it was idyllic. And I thought, oh my God, I should go here.
And so you were there for, I think, 3 semesters, right?
Yes.
And were you able to have a somewhat normal college experience? I guess it would have been pre-smartphones, everybody, borrowing.
Pre all that stuff.
Yeah.
I had a very normal college experience, yeah. I lived in the dorms. I shared a dorm with a girl I didn't know and who ended up becoming a good friend of mine. And I mean, I just did everything that every regular old college kid did. Ate in the dining halls and joined the fun clubs and went out at night and missed class and, did all that stuff. It was so great.
So you've said in other interviews that leaving Tufts after that year and a half or whatever to go back to the business was one of the toughest calls you've had to make. What tipped the scale?
My intuition is that I felt like, well, if I don't do this now, maybe I won't have another opportunity. Maybe I'm losing my opportunity. Maybe I'm losing my momentum. I think there's a lot of pressure around the people that you work with that maybe when you're super young to continue that momentum. Right. I think maybe that was part of it. And also I did miss it. I loved it, and I hadn't really done that much outside of Seventh Heaven. Yeah. So I was hungry for something new and something else.
All right. So a few other things that seem to have that I read about along the way, and I just wondered if you can shed light on, what the circumstances were around it. We talked about it in the early years. You were interested in musical performance, musical theater. There was an article I saw that said that there was going to be a Broadway musical version of Women on the Verge of a Nervous Breakdown that you were potentially going to, looking to do. And then also Les Miserables, the movie version in 2012. Were those actual possibilities, and are you actually interested in singing in front of massive audiences now?
Yes and yes. So Women on the Verge was a really cool and interesting piece of material, and they asked me to come in and be a part of the workshop. So I did just that, went to New York, and we workshopped it for, I think it was a couple weeks. It wasn't very long, but it was intensive. And by the end of it, we got to the point where we were, kind of somewhat staging things and singing it full out for all the producers and everything. And Bart Scher was the director, and he was amazing, and I loved working with him. And honestly, after that, they asked me to be in the production because they were going to go for it. And I'd never done any workshop like that before. I didn't know really what to expect. And I just had this instinct that it wasn't for me. After going through the workshop, I really loved the music, and it was super challenging and really, really kind of odd, like an unusual kind of musical. But I just didn't quite, I couldn't quite wrap my head around it during the during the workshop. I didn't have a handle on my character, and I just didn't think that I was going to do it justice. So I stepped away from it, which was a really hard decision because, yes, of course, back from my Annie days, I'm thinking that I'm going to have this moment sometime, on Broadway, on the stage, and
maybe it'll still happen.
Maybe it will. Yeah. The Les Mis thing, I auditioned multiple times, or just maybe two, maybe just one. It felt like I was auditioning a lot of times, but I certainly auditioned for it, and felt like I had a really good musical audition. But I just didn't go my way.